Hello, America is about gain of function. For example, this is about hyper news for New York City, for the cities throughout America, for the suburbs throughout America. We're going to have to, obviously, when we're dealing with what's simultaneously, we're going to have to use what's sequentially simultaneously as two distinct identities of sequence nature and demonstration of what is simultaneously actually. So what is simultaneously actually recorded, for example, when we use the archaeological evidence of how forced by a breaching method was uses of color with the law that were forced by a breaching method. That also was sophistication here since before our founding parents who didn't have free speech because of those slavery laws against every single person that forced it sickly distinctly because there was functions by that. So I'm not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a police force, I'm not a criminal, I'm not a judge. Originally, still, we know that witch trials were simultaneous. They left out the simultaneous because there are revelations there. Revelations they can't afford, for example, because opinions A through Z / convictions A through Z at campuses A through Z. They are being and having been maintained through other motivations, natures, needs, interests, individually grouped and together bound, but by a breaching method. So as ulterior methods, motivations, natures, needs, interests, relative to the increasing value of needing to understand where and how the breaching method was sophistication here before the founding parents, not only of America as a country, but before the founding parents of the countries that were involved with fighting with themselves, not while they were planting colonies here, while they were replacing the memory of what they had actually remembered, the Native Americans. That's hyper-evidentially, hyper-evidentially needed to be counter-convicted and to counter-opine. For example, per simultaneously recorded being and having been self-valued by the fact-keeping nature qualities, aspects of opinion / convictions of the stewards, not just of sciences, because there was also simultaneously database relationships, all of them, since before computers. The method /S. The /S is also a screening method, where what nature shows us is most probable and practical. This replaced and replaces at each age of fact-keeping nature that with other short words in place of revelations and uses by what is hyper-evidential. One thing it is against every single person, sickly, non-distinctly, that everyone should want to counter, but they can't because we'll examine. But until we see it in relationship to how, not just like individually, overall, completely, grouped and down to the finite, every individual, when a system entertains slavery, nature, it's not its system. It will demonstrate criminal insidiousness nature per the electrical engineering of the identity of volume that languages are. For example, that our nature is individual species body, grouped body like the species, can't deal with the finite. So it has to increasingly self-value other campuses A through Z as ones from the best one to the worst one. They're only capable of speaking for for contrast to the other ones. They're only capable of being news, what they call news, and arrays of difference to it. In other words, Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN have been forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded to self-value roles with the FBI and with the CIA, pretending passions and emotions as adults, and with the passions and emotions of their kids know. And see that while they're sustaining that, they have to sustain proofs of it not talked about, valued not spoken about. So right there is where you have to discern where and how really what most furthers the overt criminal enterprises and the police and the private ones and the police and the people that say they're about legislation and people that say they speak for the law as justice. See, everyone was child abused specifically to make them a raise. And even people are trying to hurt each other, like judges in overt criminal enterprises and private ones, trying to counter the real causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures to all locations, areas, and state acts like predicate acts, natures like criminal insidiousness, natures, wrongdoers. So, regardless if the law was legalized improper, the nature of the law was and is supposed to be and have been spoken for as the nature of that which is hyper simultaneous, which is simultaneously, therefore, the identity of relativity. Per science, not using theory, too. It is important to be able to separate theory from scientific process. And so we have science as a bridge that where and how they defend that was and is also having been used for roles with predicate acts in legal cases, at instances, and where and how regarding where and how legal cases, instances just with life and instances with interactions with police, and where and how that's mixed, and where and how people know and don't know that. In other words, that is involved with an identity theft and fraud slander method too, where they're making exceptions with strangers we only know because they sought us out to make all these confessions too. Confessions are used by each branch of government and by the overt criminal enterprises and by private ones. Originally still because of where it is a fact-keeping nature-oriented method, a function, a breaching method function, /S. And the /S part has to do where it is exploiting where and how it knew and knows that nature demonstrates negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures relative to where and how we have identity of the ground locations. Since before the founding parents of Russia, since before of America and of Russia, they have the same suburbs, little lawns. Everyone's been mowing the lawns, putting it away. Every year, less nutrients go into the soil for the worms, or less each year, less strong. The birds, it changes everything. The worms used to walk into water, puddles. It's their nature. They used to walk into waters and ponds, streams that were all covered over, tactically nature. The narratives juxtaposed with narratives regarding motivations, real, even when real, juxtaposed with other ones, originally and still. So we need to have mandated law followed at locations. Otherwise, you have to entertain. See, there are people offensively pretending passions and emotions, trying to hurt people's feelings as people speaking for success. I thought best. In other words, they know New York City, for example, is overtly the evidence. There are people that are being tortured, they had been tortured in New York City since before the World Trade Center attack. No, when they put against our founding parents' wishes, torture in there, and where and how they'd also already forced other countries forced this to be the outcome. In other words, people from Weathersfield into Branch, and exceptions and exception nature tied to them. They had already been involved with planting evidences at locations, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders instances, as victim predators, as victims to where our hierarchies and themselves were in a whole bunch of other countries involved with them on off campuses with distinct natures of completely separate instances and natures of organized crime, illusions posited and being posited roles, lie progressions based on, for example, where the breaching method has functional distinctly from our own and from the other countries, individually grouped and together, used remotely. Used remotely when they speak about sophistication, grouped. They came through this that replaced how we think properly. We're actually not regarding, so they have theories and physical delusions that are juxtaposed with criminally foreign influenced. Evidence perception, racketeering, worse than war crime rules never having been addressed. For example, relative to treatments of black and white that simultaneously left out the breaching method, that simultaneously leave it out while it is having been left out. And while that was having been noted by people, but they are pretending that they don't understand that people are, locations are prevented, mandated law by the interbranch that have been pretending people, even the fake communications with police officers, with groups of kids that did go in with their parents and speak with police. And in other words, and they too, like Chris Walters gave an affidavit. They kept trying to make him say other things, and they put him there in a car with me with my neighbor, and they made them bring up organized crime things. I had no communications about it, and they left that out, and then they forced them to try to say fake words. But then there were judges involved with it too. So if I countered them, they were going to keep furthering what they were doing against me in every camp, every single person. And so they were blocking me from discerning. That would have blocked me. In other words, I've been trying to get a response in writing since I was a kid. These people have been putting pretended exceptions, making fake exceptions, which is also relevant because there is no exception. It is unnatural slavery. The only way it is natural is as criminal insidiousness. In other words, as exception nature, as criminal insidiousness nature, which is forced from here as value. That is no longer positive, forever nature, temporary, that is also lasting positive. So our criminal insidiousness nature is going to make positive and negative treatments, like the people involved with witch trials and slavery simultaneous. Regarding that, rather than using their simultaneous values, which were identity, ground, location values, offensively against free speech, offensively against proper uses of fear. They're not going to speak about fear, honestly. They're not going to speak about love, honestly. In other words, this is how we have to understand American history, using phrases like criminal insidiousness, wrongdoers, wrongdoing. That's what they may defend it. Our founders had to hide their roles, counter-extorting the other founding parents. And everyone had to hide their roles with that narrative forced upon them because it was against the law on a whole bunch of different levels, not just against England's laws, but against how individually grouped and together, North and South, distinct countries fighting with themselves actually, and while fighting with other people, not by accident. Our founders were fighting with each other, while Native Americans had been fighting with each other. Colonists had been fighting with each other. The identity of the grounds, the identity of relationship to itself, non-distinctly from Mars, too, was by a breaching method, singular, prevented how our value/variable progression works and where and how we are syntax nature, conjunctive to that which is hyper-simultaneous, and conjunctive to that which is simultaneous, which they can't afford, because then if they afford a discernment of that, the value and needs of the discernment of the hyper-simultaneous, relevant to subjects treatments, would be realized. See, in other words, so hyper news is an untapped industry. They've been preventing self-value roles, preventing people free speech, and pretending they don't realize there's only three branches of government, exception nature tied to them, have been attaching everyone to fake words and locations. They have been shown needs to pretend they have integrity where they don't have integrity. The branches of the government individually grouped in together. So American people, they know when we see you guys speaking that the people that give you your information are lying to you, and you guys tell us, we want to be presented, we want to be presentable to the people. In other words, if you want to be presentable to the people, you should not take roles with three branches of government switching names so they could delay and stack more names and roles with them, criminally foreign influence, since they were kids involved with a predicate acts delivery system method, relevant to where and how. For example, and I want to make movies to be like owned by the parts of education that can't afford. Where and how the people who have the most money and the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and the insidiousness to people's positive and negative treatments, identity treatments, everyone A through Z, still in the collusion with it, with it self-value. The roles with the breaching method, blamed on other things other than self. Right when you take any history book, you could discern this. When you look at the premises treatments, watch how they use isms with physical delusions and simultaneously self-value, criminally foreign influence, fact, nature, qualities, and aspects. The people that you are only allowed to hear at local news too, regarding the shootings that are being and haven't been addressed sickly, distinctly, and properly, simultaneously, by the people as all victims, but as victim predators, preventing anyone without, in other words, the police aren't allowed to tell on their superiors, obviously. In other words, and this is where and how it's relevant, where and how the branches of government individually grouped it together today, where and how they have overtly / insidiously been used remotely and self-valued that. So they didn't realize themselves originally, still because of how they replaced at the short words at the young ages. Campuses A through Z. You can't tell American history without teaching about the database relationship that the Republic has. That was revealed before what couldn't entertain itself, that was preserving it. Who couldn't entertain itself and have the short words and the revelations and the protraction afforded, told, not even the short words. So it maintained fact treatment nature as a volume, as ulterior, as our volume, humanity's volume, ulterior now from where and how, identity / IES, or identity / identities works, species, body, singular. Group takes on singular with syntax, defenses of their logic. It breaks down as not being led by the simultaneous. only that which cares for the premises, treatments, and the actual quality, actually the value of what is being and having been written in databases about people. And before they speak on or have differences that people make opinions about on Facebook, like the campuses, that and relevant to and as roles with identity theft, frauds, motivations, that also on a mass scale, countries A through Z, they're against our own. They pretend people when we use what is hyper-evidential syntactically. They pretend people are saying that others are evil. And when we say they're good, they're pretending we're saying they're good so they can't be evil. When, for example, where and how black was used and has been used, all the opinions and convictions left out, the breaching method, that's evidence. And simultaneously, how they prevent that from being discerned too, and why and how it's the relevance of it. It's relevant at those locations where everywhere where they are tactically denatured. The suburbs were designed to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, and to make self-value roles with criminally foreign influence exception nature, to cause positive and negative value nature progressions, acts, and nature, specifically to have self-value abridged natures of positive and negative and names treatments used in sequence and simultaneous treatments used per your locations used. Excuse me. Excuse me. Excuse me. Hello? Mother. My mother. I don't know what she said to me. Floss the teeth. Okay, so serious. So then New York City, the cartoon character Seth regarding New York City, and regarding, in other words, they're part of the black pupils, and what it began as was a little rap guy and his brother Remus, or a little rap guy and a guy named Black Jimmy from a boxing gym. They came up with a way, in other words, to catch the branches of government lying regarding them pretending they have integrity, using that and how nature is going to demonstrate negative value nature progressions individually grouped and together, where and how fact treatments leave out that breaching method, where and how it put color used with /s used with the law. And note how that which is simultaneous is obviously native pure, unabridged. The Constitution unabridged. If Native Americans sense, in other words, below their feet, they have to mow the lawns, they have the houses that are fit to a scale since before our founding parents were born, involved with the torture and slavery against them, forced fact treatment nature roles, positive and negative treatments, identity treatments they didn't want to make, time treatments, simultaneous treatments, and they just attached and still attach everyone to fake words. There's a method to it. And it's also complete possession of the narratives regarding people's motivations, even when they're correct. Those are all having been used remotely. So it's overtly recorded, for example, where and how the principal child abuser campus, the principal child abuser then and now was recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with wire crimes and with digital upskirt crime roles with people. He doesn't even know the extent of the confession. To meet others, they faked emails to force that with other people then and now, because they've been doing this with some of the parents have been using their kids to demonstrate, confess, record a whole bunch of different ways, where and how personally they're going to be hurt, and or they're going to be hurt worse unless, in other words, and they're not going to be able to get the right fact treatment nature to anyone to pretend they could understand people relative to where and how they have been stacking fake things in databases and already had coordinated and still coordinating off campuses at locations, uses of that through other motivations, natures, needs, interests, narratives, apparent motivations. So juxtaposed with all the apparent motivations we knew and know that are already stated and recorded too, though, because that's mixed with what's pretended perceived and what's really believed perceived, that is leaving out and having had left out the breaching method, which again was measuring and maintaining self-valued roles with increasingly replaced its identity of values, identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that to our logic. In other words, it is more important than to know any name of anyone in history to understand how rolls with those laws, sickly distinctly against everyone, and to understand how they were sickly non-distinctly, and that was undiscerned, is what the subject is. Where and how the evidence is where how you guys left out with your opinions and convictions, where and how the breaching method put color to be used by the law, where and how it put that identity of the ground locations as roles with the torture method that is additional to slavery. You don't leave out what is additional to. One doesn't leave out what, because we have to use the simultaneous nature if we're going to speak for integrity of the nature of the law. See, but the nature of the law, like a overt criminal enterprise, some kind of gang, in collusion with the overt criminal enterprises and gangs, and with the private ones, all kept needing the same. We see why these are the people that are offensively passionate about families, because they're filming exceptions. They're planting evidences, crimes at locations, sequence shifts, on and off campuses too, while on and off interbranch. Instances of even depositions are having been used to further syntactical identity theft frauds, roles where they paint arrays. People pretended that had conflicts, people pretended were friends that are in collusion with the same sequence shifts, identity theft frauds, instances, roles, uses of exceptions, where and how where those exceptions, where people have to say they don't know other people, where they get brought into people roles with lie progressions as all tied back to the same names and uses of the same locations relevant. So a principal child abusers campus also has investigators in their campuses of people that interstates that train the people who answer the phones distinctly from the people who speak, and where and how we need to have hyper-journalism, because mandated law was not followed. And they pretend other in collusion. They've been planting evidences with wire crimes, the news media, in collusion with the people, with the prisons, too, with the interbranch and all exception nature tied to them, the military, too. They've been involved with uses of databases, including at campuses A through Z. There is a shared uses of them by our own. Those uses are individual grouped and together bound, but also by a breaching method. Thank God, also by nature, which nothing could get more finite than, and nothing can get greater than. But we have to admit its course. So gain of function. Now they're speaking of gain of function. They want to, with Dr. Fauci. Now they also have attacks on Dr. Fauci, specifically because they need to put up where and how they go. If someone uses Dr. Fauci's name, because he's one of the people that made fact achievements in collusion with MSNBC, Fox News, and CNN with their Facebook pages and with criminally foreign influence readings of statutes with a former director of the FBI in his defendant capacities leading up to the World Trade Center attack and since. Also through the roles with the value of databases information, intercampuses of each age and nature, connected, involved with a breaching method function and uses of it. One thing it is commonly against everyone is identity theft, frauds, instances, roles, and their narratives pretending passions and emotions. So they can't put anything on paper because they are passions and emotions are really they are part of the function, so we could discern what was made up by someone or what is really simultaneously valued. See, but we have this offensively perceived by the pseudo integrities A through Z, including the rest of the government, individually grouped together, only 3 of them. They've been roles with this. And so valuing the sequence shifts and what they've been doing at the child campuses of the youngest ages is important. And then how they have kids go to public schools and then they go to private schools is also involved with the identity theft fraud method. They use the identity ground location. It uses abuses of the boys and of the girls. It's just focusing on the girls. It uses abuses of them individually grouped and all together. It uses abuses of the boys individually grouped and together bound. And that is further being and having been bound worse by the breaching method, but that is also using that remotely, having used it remotely, where it uses all locations remotely, where and how simultaneously that uses of our fact-sheet nature, uses of our identity, individually grouped in together. So mandated laws prevented at locations. What is actually recorded of the branch of the government offensively confessing, demonstrating, recording, threatening, collusion with overt criminal enterprises and private ones at locations and at their own, fabricating things into databases, collusion with that being having been done at campuses databases, and uses of the families and locations and sensibilities of their identities individually grouped in together. So the Wethersfield Post Office and the UPS has an Oliveri family and a Joshua Stryker involved with federal crimes with Dean Alford or someone pretending to be him, with co-defendants, a former director of the FBI, also involved with various natures of courts, judges, and their families, and the families of the people that work for them, who have been coordinating intercities next to schools, identity theft, fraud, slanders, roles, uses of passions, emotions, pretended legitimate regarding their treatments of culture, of their own and of others. For example, their identity theft, fraud, slander method /S roles. And so, in other words, to be able to counter, we have to be able to counter uses of the name switching and forging interbranch. That's some of the methods they have recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with military, also involved with this, and people on off the state judicial branch offices. Also, I got people to confirm things. Strangers made all these confessions at once. And regarding Kevin Dillon, and there's an Anna Dillon, and her switching the name Annie and Anna, or 2 different ones. And these are also people that these are departments that do, the Wethersfield Police Department switches names of officers because they involved themselves since they were kids, attaching me and others to fake ties to themselves, fake natures of ties to themselves, and to their friends. They were planting evidences, identity thefts, fraud, slanders, telling little lies, and also as roles with people with class placements, specifically to further the worst nature of things and uses of where and how they have uses of confessions, where and how it is functional by the breaching method, distinctly from where and how it is functional, individually grouped and together by the other motivations, natures, needs, interests relevant to their narratives regarding said motivations and legitimacy or practicality, and actually motivations and practicality. In other words, which is juxtaposed with physical delusions, like we're regarding treatments of color /S. So we have to be able to have mandated law follow at locations, not just interbranch. They can't follow there, they can't follow here. Increasingly, there's self-valuing collusion with on and off campus police forms involved with identity thefts and frauds. I never had any communications with, any verbal communications with Paul Zano at Highcrest School years ago. He's involved with the intelligence community interstates, also has people involved with sequence shifts with them and with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and trying to plant exceptions. There's a Joshua Julian too. I never had anything to do with ever Joshua Julian. He's involved with some men and women from Trinity College and CCSU. They've been planting evidences also with people on my street involved with wire crime confessions of Wethersfield police. They've been delaying responses so they could coach people to cover up what I caught them doing since before the World Trade Center attack every year since too, leading up to it too. The ones from Connecticut involved, where then how they were involved was their roles through fact treatments with instances of arrests, of just speaking. In other words, they've been using the campuses since before, and since everyone was little kids, the men and women they have involved now, uses of other campuses, the other motivations they have juxtaposed with where and how they are teachers and have kids in other schools, etc. And everyone forced to use other people's names, all fake. People see the news, they know it's fake integrity. You guys are preventing the simultaneous from being valued so we can discern what's actually recorded. You guys are preventing scientific process from having voice. You guys had licenses to try to stop that, but you were victims of what keeps the overt criminal enterprises and private ones recorded through time collusions, on-off job sites, coordinated as rules on-off campuses with identity theft, fraud, slanders, falsified police reports, roles, uses of those shared illusions as and insidious positive and negative treatments as uses of identity ground locations. Also, with that having been left out, also the breaching method, using and having used all that individually grouped and together too. It sounds complicated, but it's not complicated. Computers are trying to mimic this, and they're trying to make it seem more complicated. They're trying to make what's extensive seem complicated. Math can only measure that which is invisible but still discernible, which has conjunction to that which is the value of the hyper simultaneous, for example, is only increasing, which is distinct identity of simultaneous. Nature is that as one of the things that constantly, that which is invisible but still discernible simultaneously is value as, is a simultaneous nature, is a sequence nature, a sequence / simultaneous nature. A subject is a sequence / simultaneous nature, /s. A predicate is a subject / simultaneous nature, /s, where and how the species body individual is relevant to where and how nature demonstrates how it wants us to think and to perceive and to not and to and to believe and to not disbelieve and to believe or disbelieve tactile terror from people tell you now. Only roles with uses of the identity ground locations, identities of logic that are juxtaposed with with delusions and criminally foreign influence premises treatments. So their ground conjunction to where and how they force people to speak through others. And that's roles with the child abuses, that distinct types of Catholicism and distinct types of so we have a trap that came from some ancient times that made countries A through Z self-value uses of their own identities and others' identities that are really uses only of the archetypal criminal enterprise, the hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise identity, not nature's identity, where and how we are bound, individual, group, species, body. When we are in a positive value nature progression, per logic, its logic is going to value the individual finite first. That logic, therefore, is going to value how overtly / insidiously there is a spring of revelations and of means to discern the hyper-invisible and the invisible but still discernible of what causes the negative value nature progression acts and natures in New York City. See, when they make positive and negative treatments, they're making identity treatments, and they're leaving out roles self-value with the child where at the youngest ages, what is actually recorded is having been replaced with physical delusions juxtaposed with criminally foreign influence, fact treatment, nature, narratives, and justifications for them, motivated also by, again, the real causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures into those classrooms at campuses A through Z. So, in other words, that was sustained specifically to make manifest other motivations, nature's needs, interests, pretending other, when how nature would and does demonstrate the sciences of bridge, and not relevant to where and how we answer things, using the value of the simultaneous to do it properly or not. If we use the value of the simultaneous properly, then we'll also be able to use what is hyper-simultaneous. Will be a quality of fact treatment nature that won't have offensively denied by people while simultaneously affronts are against us. In other words, they'll make crimes happen against you of all different natures if you try to get a response to the weird interbranch fabric attaching us to fake words and ties to ourselves and their family members, because they had the high life progressions. They had the high roles with predicate acts against us and against the people around us, because they grew up using an evidence crime method. So the C.M. Faglione family and Tim St. Tim O'Brien. I never met Tim St. in my life. Never had one time in bus. I said hello. Never had a conversation with my life. They was brought up by confessions involved with people with a former rare gold. It has something to do with people with, he's involved with federal criminals of juxtaposed natures, including ones that were before they got caught, that were involved with his people around his houses too. Involved with, prison people, families that ran with prisons and have roles with the databases. Therefore, no people that worked with college campuses have roles with that. They have various people that run around between different car dealerships have roles with that. Medical campuses, their databases, especially the mental health ones. Their families have been involved with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, attaching and with other doctors, foreign and domestic, attaching people and with their roles with hierarchies in fire departments, intercities in Connecticut, interstates. So I never met or had a conversation with a Brian Saville. I don't know the name he's using on Facebook, but he had to have a picture of him from a yearbook. And his name was recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with some judges and prosecutors who were planting evidences on my and putting identity thefts and frauds roles. As ones now, as adults associated with them still, with those adults that have been themselves involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, also in the form of falsified police reports roles, and with uses of those, the illusions associated with those predicate acts and wrongdoing roles. And it has something to do with the domain family that sought me out to confess, demonstrate, record. They are planting evidences also with religious spots and uses of a Miss Riley, who was my teacher. They lied about her to my back, and they made her make a confession about her ties to one of the houses in my area near me, with the police involved with that years ago, as ones that have been involved with identity theft frauds from behind my back. Some Mike Domain sat across from me and said things about how he was Jewish a couple times. His friends always call each other Jew. I never used that language one time with them. So they were trying to get, that's what they do. They have people lie about, they have behavior racketeering. They have little immature people that, what they call mature. Oh, well, this person's a police form undercover. That takes maturity. This is their acting coach. I don't know. They have acting coaches involved with the Connecticut news media locations, and they have roles with the corner of with houses on Church Street in Old Wethersfield involved with identity thefts and frauds, and with the names brought up in the wire crimes by the Wethersfield police. Also with the principal child abuser, where they were using the principal child abuser and others to take pictures of girls and boys distinctly to exploit them on off campuses, intercities through time. There was a Gill family recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed as one of the ones involved before the World Trade Center attack, and then since with courts, prosecutors and judges, investigators, and police forms, military, foreign and domestic. They've been fabricating audio and video, also with foreign and domestic medical families. And they have roles together individually, groups, for example, with psychology, also relevant to where and how, and medical community, where they have badges, and they're supposed to be able to speak for logic and for physical delusion, but their delusions rot, and there are roles with these methods, offensively fabricating things into databases, fake communications with people. There was a Leahy family that pretended to hold fake conversations with me about legal cases and about my family with federal criminals proven having been involved with crimes against them, having been exploiting exceptions to the law where they have rights for people to lie about the others because if they're in an election for union leadership. And they've been using the exceptions to further where and how they've been using the overt criminal enterprises and the private ones, also involved with other methods and natures of abuses of the boys and girls individually grouped and together. Many people from Wethersfield will confess, demonstrate, and record. I don't know them, and they only know me through others. Where, in other words, and they were lying about people that, I don't know if they know this, but they lied to them about where I was coming before that. And it's relevant because these are the people in the background with these games and the narratives with NBC Connecticut News, with their sources on off the campuses, whereas some of their sources are from WFSB, then the people in Rocky Hill that has locations next to them, also involved with the families through time, involved with juxtaposed natures of organized crime and of child abuses. Now, I also are involved with locations next to elderly homes and with employments on them that were also having been exploited Also per the probate courts, family members, and things like that with juxtaposed natures of organized crime and with their family members and their patients and criminals and people on campuses involved with identity theft and fraud methods bound by a singular method. For example, I don't know that Debbie Gold pretended to know me, and she was screaming at me, and then she used my response to fake like I had done something wrong. She did that with various natures of federal criminals before they got caught, people associated with them, and with the O'Brien family that also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed how they were and are differentially criminally foreign influenced increasingly, and aware of that and pretending other, like per their uses of a flag. And they sought me out to confess, demonstrate that, and uses of confessions in a car by the two brothers, also connected to the Mark Violet and Jessica Govinskis, also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed roles with the O'Brien family, the Colella family, also with the people brought up by the police, and further involved with the child abusers campus. Juxtaposed natures of child abuse 2 times. They're not going to use their roles with badges and police types. They have roles with federal criminal code defendants, a former director of the FBI, and their family members, and their lawyer, and himself in his defendant capacity, also having been involved with predicate acts on and off my campus is connected. So they've been exploiting exceptions. They don't have the rights to do predicate acts in cases and pretend other and further that not told about by using Facebook for that, by using little tricks with exploiting the policies. They have the sense and sensibilities of Facebook, of the other online companies, from their roles with campuses, A through Z, vertically and horizontally connected. So there are police forums with Rhode Island who had communications with a Zano family that is involved with locations next to the state, next to along Route 3, but also next to the Southstein Middle School. He's involved with identity thefts and frauds. Also recorded involved with a Leahy family, attaching me fake locations, fake words with themselves and others. And since I was in grammar school. So he was also, I found out he was one of the ones involved with men and women behind my back. I never had a conversation. They were pretending I had mental diagnosis as a kid. They're making up things about the kids. And with the doctors who have their kids involved with federal crimes, spreading lies and sequence through their friends about other kids that they never even met through time. And they have people that work with the Institute of Living involved with the houses next to the and with real estate agents next to the campuses. There's a house next to the there's a house, they're using the sensibilities of everyone forced to speak through other people. And the news attaching me and others to fake, and me and everyone around me to fake words since I was a kid. They did this. They forced Saudi Arabia people to roles with federal crimes of Wethersfield police, ones that were involved with federal crimes, identity thefts and frauds, with people from other classrooms when I was a kid. There's a Chet Casper. I never had a class with him in my life. Never saw him around campus in my life. He's involved with identity thefts and frauds. 2 times he non-verbally confirmed in downtown Hartford, and 1 time on the Southstein Highway. It's a Lowe's now. It used to be a movie theater, and I don't know his friend's name. He was in my grade too. I never had a class with him. I don't know his name. He's also involved with identity thefts and frauds with him along Route 3, and with people on my street involved with identity thefts and frauds. Forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded roles too. They do and don't know. Like as the name Khalil brought up by the police confessions over the phone, and as by the nonverbal confirmations of the what is his name? A Detective Dillon was involved with him and his family when he was a kid. Ray Claw, fabricating audio and video, spreading lies about people, trying to put people to fake ties to others, fake natures of ties to others, and with a former mayor Gold. I only saw Joe Isla one time. I saw him around my neighbor Ray Claw and at Joe DeMoro at his house. We were there for like 2 minutes, and then we left. We were right next to a pool table. We didn't play pool at all, and we left. They were trying to make an exception. There are other people tied to the Joe DeMoro involved with the Bellevue Square Boxing Club and with the military. A guy named Dave involved with them with houses next to the state prison offices that are involved with intercities, on off campuses, identity theft frauds, evidences crimes, federal rules of evidences crimes, identity theft fraud, slanders rules, uses of overt criminal enterprises and private ones, per where and how they have roles with juxtaposed natures of abuses of kids and uses of the investigator types to types of those crimes, where they're blaming uses of bound on other things others themselves. For example, again, relative to where their color treatments. So we're not going to be able to deal with this properly unless we use phrases like criminal insidiousness. And there are means to show hyper recorded that and how the prisons have been in collusion with, including medical campuses, with worse than war crimes, with this evidence racketeering rule. The worst parts, how it's different, even where it's discernibly differentially worst, especially, it's leaving out the breaching method, which is worse than everything. Now, so we can't leave them to discern what's good or bad, then to branch, because they are offensively affront to the short words and uses of hyper-evidential. They are forcing everyone to roles, pretending they are truth tellers, leaving out exceptions in exception nature. Otherwise, saying nothing. Or lying for other motivations, natures, needs, interests, even when real. They have the worst patients and criminals, the worst victim predators used for their own methods and needs to get over on innocent people. The identities of experts that speak for them and uses of them. Music playing in the background. I'll gather around. So the New York gang can use and will use the pamphleteers where we could cheaply do this. In other words, right, I'm a pamphleteer. Help us out. We're gonna, and come to my video. Once I get someone saying, once we have we'll start getting it functional. YouTube ground. We'll keep making YouTube ground videos that are about this. And in other words, then we'll have what we want and need is to have them made like a hyper agency, the people stacked upon New York City. And around that, so we have to take a big mass of people, any location of New York City. If there's anybody who can get yourself and you think you can get anyone around you who wants to have fought for that which is hyper-evidential. In other words, that and how you guys are tortured You guys needed injunctive relief before anyone could pretend that the law or America's identity has been spoken for. America's identity has not been spoken for. Our founders left us to speak that their identities have not been spoken for. George Washington could say he could tell no lies because this is relative to where and how we have to be a quality of fact, cheap nature that can counter criminal insidiousness as syntactically, and then defenses of that. See, this showed and shows the people speaking at through the only allowed media discerned collusion with behavior narratives where they are psychopaths still, in collusion with the worst patients and criminals, and against everyone, and with their doctors associated with that, foreign and domestic here. Russians, people from Korea, people from Afghanistan, involved with Wethersfield Police Department with drugs and medicines crimes, and with physical delusions simultaneously, switching and forging names with various natures of courts. One-way reports. So I'm not a licensed journalist. Hyper-journalism is an untapped industry. New York City. In other words, I'll concentrate it to your ownership if you guys, do it this way where it'll work for the country and the species body. Not pretending that identity has been spoken for. Using functionally how we're going to be. The identities of the law. Syntactically, we could do it. So we caught the prisons in collusion with the campuses and with the interbranch, and with all exception nature tied to them, and with the hundreds of countries individually grouped together in collusion with their logic. That's all we need. So in other words, to show how to make positive out of negative that is also positive unto itself. It's one thing to make a positive out of negative. In other words, it's another thing to make it automatically positive into more positive everywhere at once. Or it is forced from here anyway. The value we have forever while we are forging it now. Everything is a demonstration of this. So mandated law is not followed at locations. So if I wrote a book, I'm being prevented offensively from quality of fact, cheap nature uses of finite, active, progressive truths, while they're valuing fake words and fake information with local news and with national news. National news has roles with narratives given to the attorney generals for regardless what party, who it is. We don't even need the same reason we don't need to know names to know American history. We need to understand how criminal insidiousness nature was propagated. How this, and proofs of it too, is where and how they pretend people want to debate that. The logic they use is evidence. That's also why and how we have to have that. It uses criminally foreign influence, fact, cheap nature, qualities, aspects. It uses the physical delusion simultaneously. That's one of the reasons too. Why my increasing reasons why at all locations, like online here with YouTube. I'm not making a conspiracy theory. Some people know that our country and other countries pretend people make a conspiracy theories. If we point out how uses of color and logic about the causes of it as entertained, how it leaves out that which was simultaneous, and how the breaching method forced that, how the breaching method exploited that. Not just against the people that hurt it most, because then you can't discern the breaching method. to care for the people who hurt the most and is hurting increasingly the most. You have to forgive not the breaching method, to defend blame on halfway. We have to go complete. And so we have a former director of the FBI in his defending capacities, where the FBI does not have the right to lie, in collusion with FBI saying they have the right to lie where they don't, and in Congress. We have them other ways too, grouped, the executive branch and the judicial branch, the congressional branch. And we have grouped the judicial branch and the congressional branch. And we have grouped the judicial branch and the executive branch with crime methods. For example, switching names in sequence and prohibiting the value of that from being discerned. Offensively by stealing, by self-value, identity theft, fraud, slander roles. Also only having gotten away with themselves for what I caught them doing with locations on and off campuses of the youngest ages and employments at them manifest relevant to and after roles with such. Boxings. So I teach you things but long. And so I don't know this Chet Casper. There are also people with New Britain Superior Court recorded involved with federal crimes with him that are also involved with, there's a Dr. Dingleberry or Dr. Dewberry involved with some people with violence in my area with Wethersfield police and with drugs and medicines crimes, threats of me, and because I caught them with gang thefts and frauds and falsified police reports roles and child abuses roles, including with the principal child abuser, more than and now involved with hundreds of reported, he's in jail, but they hid what I caught him doing with more than. They hid it by arresting me for harassment, for calling back a whole bunch of messages on an answering machine. And they simultaneously pretended it was communications over emails. They made fake emails. They put a fake letter on Trinity College, too. The same people on my street involved with untimely deaths. And a confession of Robert Rodriguez, therefore confirmed on Facebook, because they were making people make confessions because they locked little cliques of identity theft frauds rules needed to pretend they knew me in the past. Men they needed to have words with them in the past. Rob Rodriguez, he was on Route 3 years ago with his mother. He said, she walked out. I was just standing there. And he was talking to me and he showed, if they have that baseball card, to get it. Some kid involved with a baseball card. But it was like, in other words, they were planting evidences. He's involved with, I never saw him on a campus of my life. Any one of the ones that I went to, but he's involved with people on my campuses also with private school kids, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, falsified police reports roles, with my town's police chief, his daughter, a whole bunch of people tied to his daughter, per them too. And they were preventing mandated law. These are ones that Connecticut News attached me and my family to fake words about the World Trade Center attack. And they attached little kids and myself to fake ties to doctors as a kid and as an adult, sickly, distinctly. And they used forcing me to a mental evaluation 3 times for choosing to use my voice to counter violence of some male and female police officers involved with juxtaposed natures of child abuse and other natures of organized crime on and off Trinity College, and then further on and off my street before those 3 times happened, like with this Dillon family and with this Kevin Dillon, with the nonverbal confessions, demonstrations, recorded rules with uses of other parts of my area too, criminally through time, and with the military. And there's a Pat Vincent, who I never had a conversation with in my life. He's involved with class placements with people that were involved all along from Main Street, Church Street, and Old Wethersfield, and then where it goes to Church Street and Main Street. No, right there near the witch trial place, and where George Washington had to leave slavery, entrenched in Wethersfield. Still involved with identity theft fraud. A whole bunch of people with Hartford Hospital, Institute of Living involved with whole bunch of natures of federal drugs and evidences, crimes with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, abuses of little girls and boys, sickly, distinctly, identity theft, fraud, slanders, per the intelligence community rolls with this, and in their defendant capacities with former director of the FBI. Keep talking. So in other words, and they have a Joshua Stryker, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with the Eric Oliveri and investigations and investigators associated with UPS, involved with federal crimes on campuses of children, and involved with including drugs and medicine crimes. They can't defend themselves and afford syntactic counters to what fentanyl could and use and is used for, even if it's a fake substance they made up. They have the people standing there shock and awe on juxtaposed levels when they have identities of the law standing on and speaking for campuses and their identities as our own species. So New York City, we have this, the Justice Department and their narratives, like they have uses of arrays. They have uses of where they would have K, look up KNAVE, knave. They have uses of knave, positive and negative treatments, as criminal insidiousness, criminally foreign influence, specifically to keep each country needing to counter criminal foreign influence syntactically, only capable of doing it by blaming other things, others, or ourselves wrongly. The breaching method demonstrably knew that, relevant to all that is actually recorded evidence per actual recorded value treatment and non-value treatment values of where and how Black/white got involved with the law. Yin yang, therefore, too. Black and white. See, what simultaneous is evidence the most. As our human, as the species volume, everyone is the same body, the same identity of volume science as yin yang, as the individual body. We are alpha and omega, which is positive or negative. Further, where and how it is automatically temporary positive. Yin yang are temporary / lasting positive that is also positive onto itself and as itself. Yin yang, the species volume, where and how will only increase the value of that too, even after it has been formed. Heaven and hell are scientific values of pantheism. And there are proofs that English and the Trinity to teach about it. English was revealed using Allah's name as a scientific value about the simultaneous, hyper-simultaneous. And the word God, God is a variable. For example, A stands for alpha and G stands for God. A semi-nature relationship. It's as a variable, it's invisible but still discernible. Anything that's invisible but still discernible, even the extent of the invisible but still discernible that we have, is still only valuable as a semi-nature relationship to that which is hyper-invisible but still discernible. That which languages were revealed about, the nature of the predicate and the nature of the verb and the nature of the subject are distinct identities of volume. They are also non-distinct identities of volume, per that which is hypergeneration, per that which is hypergenerating. The identity of simultaneous nature, of forever nature that came before matter. that became as a perfect value progression. So matter in its juxtaposition with that forever nature, where more too distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously is in demonstration of our distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous relationship to its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that being and having been greater than and more finite than all of space / existence, while as its value / values as a value / value progression. So we could discern this. We must learn this. We learn, in other words. So I've been using words like mandated law. They've been offensively pretending they can't realize that police locations would fabricate audio and video about innocent people and need to hide what is actually recorded from humanity and their actual motivations. So people on a mass scale know that's not true. We know that the 3 interbranch locations are still knaves that are incapable of proper fact treatment reception because of how they came through improper campuses. The perfect world exists and only increases. And so we must be led by that which is hyper-functional by being hyper-invisible as what can't be imitated. And as means with us, and we have means to check. You guys are preventing me and others from checking. For example, we could use as evidence where and how they have entertained and had entertained treatments of black / white, / any color. So you know how the speaker of the Old Testament says the speaker is going to use the rainbow as its tool. They put the rainbow with gay rights, group rights, to measure and maintain a whole bunch of victim predators, for example, just like the whole bunch of victims that are preventing everyone as predators from demonstrating all the fake scientific process behind treatments of why and how color is a problem, manifest at locations relative to where formerly it is having been dictated to mean tactically ulterior from what it means naturally. When we're in a positive value nature progression, and science is spoken for, it cares about individual finite first in sequence. Logic that has to care about group and species, humanity first. It's logic that can't defend itself and afford the words, the short words and the revelations by logic and by how the mind works, therefore how the brain works. See, we have the people who know the most things getting over on correlation nature, each age and nature of it, getting over on identity, increasingly using and self-valuing having been used criminally foreign influence statutes and precedents to get away with such. Simultaneously being and having been simultaneously delusions wrought, juxtaposed delusions wrought. So there are a whole bunch of natures of motivations that are all kinds of bound, individual, grouped, and together things. But we must see through them too by staying on what is true always, not deny exception nature. We will not give up to that. We will not forgive that, though. We must have forgiveness, and understand and force that people, when they hear or speak for the law, it's not heard as blaming someone. So they pretend, oh, well, this treatment was, they already judged that. They already judged that he lost that case or she won. They lie about that too, because of that, because they increasingly have to keep out what's actually recorded, which is actually the substance of what is recorded through depositions, regardless of the outcomes of the cases, the locations of the cases, and all leading up to that are being and having been employed with criminally foreign influence uses of all locations by the breaching method. That stays an increasing subject / S. That's as the value of one of the things that are simultaneous that we don't let go of with hyperscience. New York City is they're gonna feel and understand that someone is speaking for the law, as someone speaking for the law of our nature. Actually, honestly, I'm not even a lawyer, not a police force, not a criminal, not military. Military also switching, forging names, roles, as exception nature, involved with the three branches, and the prisons tied to them, involved with crimes with their worst patients and criminals before they got caught, and their forced patients don't. But it's not just them needing to hide life progression. It's the people that run the prisons too, interstates. There's a guy who made like some punk statement on a Thomas Hearns video. So we have to get the leaderships of these prisons and of the military are also being, even with the cover-ups, because when they always allies, they're just hiding what they were doing here altogether before the attack, sickly distinctly from the attackers, the desperate psychopaths who flew their plane into the building. But that was and is effectively like used by the breaching method /S to measure and maintain itself, not just undiscerned, but with all locations, areas, and states, more and more names, natures, needs, interests, needed to keep the same finite, active, progressive life, sequence shifts, other identity theft, frauds, and other natures of illusions, past and increasingly blamed on other things, others, or ourselves. The real causes of them. All that is used remotely. That's what's actually recorded. So, especially if we can get Debbie Gold to tell the truth, and her father, because this Joe Aiello, and the only time I saw his father off, not at his father's hairdresser place, he asked me one time to go to a place next to Trinity College. And the only time one time I saw his sister off campus, or someone was next to when I was in high school, next to a Trinity College, next to a fire department, was recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. Some guy, I don't know the name of, is her boyfriend. wouldn't know communications with her. I didn't know. I was real quick instance. People were planting evidences, identity theft, fraud, slanders, as people involved with a number of families named DeMorrow, Joe DeMorrow, and one from Weathersfield with a John DeMorrow, and with a Paul DeMorrow, involved with Weathersfield police, involved with abuse of little girls, involved with uses of roles with drugs and medicines crimes with other countries, on and off Town Line Drive, businesses, roles with identity thefts and frauds, also in the form of wire crimes or methods roles, and mail crimes, and falsified police reports roles, identity theft, fraud, slanders. Also with the people, Mike Pandoff and a Spada family is also involved with the Delaferra family, with the judges involved with fabricating audio and video, and with some guy tied to with people I don't know the names of, that know my name. some guy involved with the policing of that spot and of next spots next to the where the Weathersfield Police Department is now, where he moved for used to be next to the middle schools, also involved that spot in those corners. There's a I forgot her name. Some girl with a Carvel ice cream place that used to be near that Weathersfield Police Department, and she was in my cooking class. They put people in my cooking classes involved with some courts and police and fire departments and medical community involved with identity theft, fraud, predicate acts on my street that I never even saw on my street. They're involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders too. They made exceptions in some instances. I caught them doing this relative to two and as people roles, like with Twitter too, with the principal who was involved with taking, per them reported and recorded also further, roles with hundreds of upskirt natures of little girls like at Walmart and other places involved. He was a principal at the campus with the police, with my town's police chief. All these police recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed him and his daughter and his extended family member are also roles with families associated through time with the corner of Elm Street and Route 3 and Rocky Hill. They're also all along Route 3. They have roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders instances that are connected, and uses of them are also evidences. These are also people involved further with the principal child abusers campus and with WFSB, with wire crimes with their phones too. They're making things up, including and especially more with other news companies through time too, like NBC Connecticut News, fabricated emails with them. Now there's a Joshua Stryker and other people on Trinity College who were fabricating fake letters they pretended I sent. And these are like weirdo, creepy people that had a wedding together that are involved with a girl I never had a conversation with, never had a class with her, Lucinda Alderuccio, now Lucinda Kolvenskis, who's involved with identity thefts and frauds with those men and women who were lying to the girls who went to my grammar school that weren't even in my class. I would never see around. And they were putting class placements as roles with that, and they were locking it into place as their roles with federal rules of evidence as crime, falsified police reports roles, and things they were painting fake arrays. They have the guy who they stole the speaker box from, Subby Bajerio and Jeremy Grohl, as strangers who had that. That's how they were meeting me. They were also confessing, demonstrating, recording their roles with the guy they were stealing from, with some military police and Mark Violet and some guy who was selling the drugs with the kids, but if they were using it to pretend, for evidence, crime, identity theft, frauds, roles with this former Mayor Gold, with the people stacking fake things in databases. I found out how they have all kinds of medical racketeering and roles with the narratives that pretend they're treatments of time. Oh, but I'm a math teacher. I'm just trying to teach this. That's how we speak. We need to teach because these subjects are connected. Identity scores. We have to have mandated law followed and at locations. The people who they've been already criminally for and influence uses of locations from their own 3 branches, interstates, worse than internationally. So, in other words, New York City, all we have to do, and then we'll take care. We'll be able to use emotions for their function. We'll be able to use passions for their function. So they have control over the group craziness because they have them involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders since the youngest ages. They connected to people. There's a Mike Roberts who was recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed involved with identity thefts and frauds with some kid who went to a school I went when I was in kindergarten. And it's with the Harris family. Also has their kid pretended they knew me, and he went out. He was like a boyfriend reportedly of the daughter of my town, the principal when I was at that school. And there are police forms, people associated with Quinnipiac and University who went out of their way to pretend to know me and used corners to do this. Too, for example, they use corners for identity theft frauds rules and methods, also with as the rules with uses of confessions. Because the three branches of government, where and how they are with the ones criminally foreign influenced, that they make confessions, and then they have the person non-verbally confirm it as identity theft frauds. Well, then it's shown later how they do that again later. In other words, also relevant to where and how people are using violence, having used violence, where and how they're preventing us counters, to where and how they prevent us from speaking offensively, forcing us to fake natures of ties to themselves and others. So there was a whole bunch of people at a wedding party of a Joshua Stryker and of a Joshua Stryker and or not Joshua, but that's one of the names of a Justin Govinskis and of a Lucinda Alderuccio, involved with police forms forcing people to use others' names that have been involved with interbranch, have been switching and forging names. Federal crimes with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants and their family members, and his lawyer, also on and off the locations next to Webb School, with people on and off. There's a Joshua Schumack, also with private schools and with the Webb School in Wethersfield, involved with identity theft frauds instances where they made exceptions because they have roles with federal evidences crimes as sheriffs, and people involved with Wethersfield Police, Intercities Police, fire departments. This Mike Pandolf, because when I was he didn't go to my grammar school. And Mike Pandolf and his brothers, I never even met them. People from my grammar school were involved with him with identity thefts and frauds from other classrooms, with a mayor's daughter, and with a Bryan family. And now those names are brought up to me, also by the people with the news too, by the people tied to the people that brought the news about the article when I got arrested for that. A whole bunch of different arrests I got through time have connections, and to the people involved with those narratives with the police have been fabricating things with them. And they've been switching and forging names, the police. They've been forcing, tricking, hurting, persuading roles with it. Now, this is also relevant to where and how they've been recorded themselves uses of overt criminal enterprises, plural, on and off the campuses. A whole bunch of little girls from Wethersfield were confessed, recorded, demonstrated, confirmed, haven't been influenced to walk up to me, but or make, like one girl walked up, I don't know her name, never I saw her around, tied to a Justin Kovinskis in the Stop and Shop in Wethersfield on Town Line Drive. There's people tied to Joseph Lieberman or to his wife, or to the confessions of regarding uses of CCS, Central Connecticut State University, by the FBI and CIA family, relevant to how they affected confessions by my professors and things, and where and how they had placements in my classrooms as people involved with predicate acts when I was in high school, through their relatives and through those people intimately tied to them. So their sense and sensibilities were used also for actually recorded roles, with predicate acts against every student, but it's at every campus through time. But it has been how it has been at Central Connecticut State University, with names with the military and accepting the interbranch. They train people to run prisons and stuff like that. They train people to run computers. They have the shared data reception racketeering, motivations, natures, needs, interests, methods, because they have evidence reception, and identity reception racketeering methods. So they have a bunch of people that influence to make statements to me I never responded to. That at Central Connecticut State University, they'll have recorded connections to uses of it by people on and tied to people who had conversations with people on my street and personally tied to them, who also had roles with federal crimes with databases and narratives, falsified police reports when I was a kid, where they also put the victims of the crimes in collusion with the courts, judges, and prosecutors, with drugs and medicines crimes with other countries too. So there was a guy that a subject Bajarial stole speakers from, that Ray Collo and a Tomorrow family, a Collo family and a Tomorrow family. O'Brien family have roles with a whole bunch of people of Central Connecticut State University, interbranch, involved with identity theft, frauds, and slanders, and uses of them spreading lies and illusions at locations, and interbranch switching and forging names with them. Has something to do with the West Hartford. They pretended to, they made an exception to pretend to know me in West Hartford sometime. I sat there, I didn't have communications with anyone. I wasn't introduced to anyone in West Hartford at some place with a whale where they used to have like kids go. I guess it was like a narrative where they have roles with drugs. And because these are the police officers that were doing crimes like with the Oliveri family and the Tomorrow family. They were different at different times when I didn't see them together. They wanted to make a bomb. They made bombs. They went and got the materials to make bombs. It has something to do, and I barely know them. I just know that's one of the ways I know them through my neighbors, the ones involved with the Smith, David Smith and Jamie Smith's mother too, with some guy involved with the Dr. Dingleberry Dewberry. That was the second time at Harvard Hospital. 3 times they forced me mental evaluation at Harvard Hospital. 3 times they had different people who had already been involved with predicate acts on my street and with identity thefts and frauds that had also been timed intercity, on off Trinity College, on off Central Connecticut State University, and on off various courts, including a Hartford court that had roles with the depositions associated with the former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and his co-defendants. So they were also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed having been stacking evidences at locations crimes, also with some military families, foreign and domestic, some from Kuwait and from our own Kovinskis family in West Hartford and in New Britain and in Wethersfield campuses involved federal crimes, also on off campuses where they're planting evidence as crimes. And they have the mobile gas stations recorded, confessed them as strangers that sought me out to make these confessions, as people with the military, criminally foreign influence, and roles with the identity thefts and frauds and uses of them too, where they have tricks where they use corners and they make statements like where and how I know about them with the Afghanistan families are people I don't even know the names of who made a confession when I walked through a cafeteria. And they know where you're going to walk, and they know you're not going to know the people. You know what I mean? And because how they have the confessions about how they have their roles with the overt criminal enterprises. So most people wouldn't have that to worry about, but it does affect every single person because they're making the shared role self-valuing where and how they have that which is hyper-evidential. The short words our founders left us to speak, relevant to the criminal insidiousness, natures of positive and negative treatments, and their motivations and uses of them remotely. Other is in place there. So we could have mandated law followed America, New York City, Connecticut, therefore. Connecticut, that's implied. You guys are obligated to respond to me here. The Wethersfield police have been fabricating audio and video and pretending little kids to fake locations with various natures of courts and people on off the state judicial branch offices that are used remotely where and how they have to hide their life progressions and uses of themselves and their family members and their actually recorded natures. Again, see criminal insidiousness. See the World Trade Center attack. See how the news attached me to fake words with them. Now I can't get a response, a name for the name switching and forging into branch. It's also how they use the kids, the inclusion. So also there's a Valley Crest Street in Wethersfield that has a DeMorrow family on it. And there are houses next to them involved with federal crimes with children and with houses with locations along Walker Hill and along Church Street in Old Wethersfield, involved with those same natures of identity thefts and frauds methods that were involved with that location when our founders left it there for us to demonstrate how they left slavery sickly distinctly in the North and South and against everyone. Sickly distinctly, so we could discern how sickly non-distinctly they want us to tell too. See, but we don't have mandated law followed at locations. They pretend, oh, how come you don't write a book or something like that? And I have to present it to someone. Give me a name for the who disbelieves. Interbranch, they've been forging and switching names. Dozens of falsified police reports, intercities connected through time, connections between those people and uses of them. Well, whole wire crime acts and methods self-valued by employments of the wire companies because of the self-valued employments of the hierarchies having been patriotism natures. They're not really integrity. They have a reportedly named I forgot their name, but they have families involved with the NFL. And that guy, Tom Brady, I think his name is Tom Brady. Why is his wife on bullying me on Reddit with the intelligence community and the Reddit child abusers page, recorded involved with a principal child abusers campus who is involved with upskirts natures of little kids on and off shopping centers too, with the policing of the shopping centers through time, have Kerr family, have a DeMorrow family involved with them also with on off the media locations, also involved as some of the names involved with the Wethersfield police on and off my street and on and off Fairlane Drive, fabricating audio and video with them, identity thefts and frauds roles with uses of their families and uses of as people involved with federal crimes with two speech class teachers I had in high school. See, these people are pretending others don't speak clearly as people involved with offensive planting fabricated evidences, making confessions, and then locking themselves in, pretending they could speak for the nature of the law, etc. There are identity thefts, fraud, slander, little clicks. With that, I put on LinkedIn an example of look up Joshua, or look up Justin, JUSTINKULVINSKIS. I think this is how it's spelled. And Lucinda, LUCINDA, ALDUR, I don't know, Alderuccio. But their marriage, there were a bunch of people at their wedding that are involved with identity thefts and frauds through time, also has roles with falsified police reports and various natures of federal crimes with kids and with elderly homes and with medical locations, with drugs and medicines crimes, and with military locations, with people criminally foreign influence. Identity theft, frauds, roles with the military, and with a bunch of, in other words, a bunch of ways this is recorded. Also, how they, as people involved with private schools who are involved with coordinating identity theft, frauds, instances, roles, falsified police reports, roles with the people on the public schools that have connections to each other, with uses of that too. So, vaccines. Don't wait and things. New York City, once you do, I'm going to show you change. Change comes from how we are fact, human nature, actually. not from their natures of fact treatment. They can't defend themselves. They're only defending arrays. Even if they hate those arrays, they don't know how to think. I'll heal them. Watch. Follow mandated law for them. Connecticut, intercities, intercampuses, Weathersfield, two campuses. You know, I've been asking you, get me a response for them. You have people that fabricated audio, people that there's a Subby Bajario who I don't even know, who sought me out to confess, demonstrate, record. He's involved with some judges and people he stole a speaker box from. They also brought up houses near me with that, and uses of a house at the corner of Griswold Street and Fair Lane, which that corner is also involved with a Eric Klotz, who demonstrated roles with Mike Kerr and a Joe DeMauro and other friends of his involved on my street and with the Weathersfield Police Department, like with this David Smith and Jamie Smith, also involved with the Stop and Shops and managers of that place since before they were Stop and Shop and of those locations, of those stores' locations. These are people with military police forging and switching names. They have some Inspector Mike also involved with Weathersfield Fire Department, but it's all the same ones are involved with the fire department next to that school, next to Trinity College, and there's one next to a school in West Hartford. And there are a number of teachers that teach in West Hartford and other schools involved with federal crimes with their kids in Weathersfield and with other kids, and uses of their roles with the narratives regarding who's going to be placed in what class and what's actually being and having been gone down relative to where they type things in databases and respond to instances of students regarding other students' names. They have a crime method by that, which is a whole bunch of methods, roles. It's not hard to explain. It's what's actually recorded. We have to address what's faked into the databases. That's what the problem in New York City is. And it includes how, where, and how the motivations is actually recorded and the methods recorded. The people who run the prisons and where they went to campuses are kept needing to hide the same sequence, yet finite act of progressive life and physical delusions with their worst patients and criminals, not by accident. And they have all kinds of medical racketeering and physical delusions as the experts of mental health. And they have drugs and medicines crimes with a whole bunch of other countries too, with them juxtaposed with narratives about mental health and anything. You know, they're physically delusions wrought simultaneously. So that's where and how also relevant to where and how the name switching and forging into branches self-value haven't been self-valued as roles from Connecticut with the World Trade Center attack. So New York City, don't be cowards forever. And don't pretend that, you know, having a gun and having a gang of police or having a real gang is and following orders and then just having to adapt is courage complete. You follow mandated law here. We're going to deal with where and how they've been using their words as evidence themselves. They can't even think. The people who are speaking for you. Now they're pretending this is personal, when the proofs of it is what we're trying to report, the sequence shifts. Their narratives regarding what, why, and how we're not calling them. They replace what's actually recorded, the police forms, with fabricated audio and video. The same ones fabricating audio and video with the So you notice how this is functional to the breaching method, keeping locked, isolated, foreign and domestic, and collusion, and, you know, slandering other people, pretending to do legitimate. We're trying to stop bad things from being, the people who are studying the problems with the crimes are involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, inter-campuses connected, also on off campuses further connected, at all locations, roles with this, offensively. You'll see what's actually discernible and recorded. So it has something to do with families next. John Mayan was involved with the sequence shifts. He hung around with people that were in my grade. And then I stayed back too. The reason I stayed back from that teacher and the one I took the same class the next year, that other teacher and the person they put in the class recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved a whole bunch of juxtaposed natures of child abuses with people on off and identity thefts and frauds, falsified police reports rolls, with people on off and hate crimes, and worse, with people on off the state prison offices and houses next to them, involved also with their roles with uses of Connecticut boxing gyms and murders used to lock people roles into where they can't and won't address subjects and names, where they're forcing people to speak through others too. Roles. Connecticut gyms are forcing me to speak through others because they have some courts and people from the state judicial branch offices and next to the state prison offices, involved with people with the military, involved with identity thefts and frauds behind my back, fabricating audio and video, and way worse. And through time, intercampus is connected. So get them on paper. And they have those are the same ones with a whole bunch of other countries involving predicate acts with them and methods of them relevant. So that's what's relevant to where and how we could use the revelations for where and how people were entertaining uses of color, believing out, will force that, and how they were blaming other things other than themselves, and how they were self-valuing it. Because that's also recorded how used remotely, just like all the locations. Hey.